Hello. We Genesis 9, starting in verse 8. Then God spoke to Noah and his sons with him, saying, As for me, behold, I will establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So in this covenant that God makes with Noah, which is interesting because I believe it is the first occurrence of the word covenant. Pretty sure on that one. I don't have it noted in my Bible, and usually I have that written down in Genesis, all the first occurrences of words. But the covenant is simply that God will never bring a Mabul, a flood, a worldwide catastrophic flood which will kill all flesh. Now, this is one of those things where the Bible kind of helps authenticate the Bible. If God were saying that he would never again bring any flood, well, that would be wrong. Also, obviously, God is not going to bring another flood of the same kind. And so if the first flood had been a local flood, local to the Middle East or whatever, well, then this doesn't make any sense. But if the first flood was a worldwide flood, God's never done that again. And so this flood did cover the entire world. And so God gives us a sign of the covenant. He gives us something that we can remember and see this covenant from. And that sign is a rainbow. And so we see the rainbow in the skies, and it reminds us twofold, really. One, that God will never judge the earth again by a flood. But secondly, it's also a good reminder that God will judge the earth again. But it won't be by a flood that second time. He's going to judge the earth with fire, we read about, when fire comes down in the very end and everything's going to be consumed. Sadly, the rainbow has been somewhat hijacked these days, but many Christians continue to remember that the rainbow is a sign of God and his covenant with us, that he'll never do this again, and that he'll never destroy all flesh via a flood. Now, this idea of a covenant, this is one of the first covenants. Well, it's the first covenant of the Bible. And what we see in it is a unilateral covenant. It is a covenant that goes one way. Noah didn't have to do anything to be a part of this covenant, right? It just, God declared it. He declared it's everlasting from generation to generation. What was the exact wording? For perpetual generations, it says in verse 12. This is the way that God makes covenants work. He makes them and he keeps them. There's nothing people or Noah have to do to be recipients of this covenant. And again, the sign of the covenant is the rainbow. Later on in Genesis, give us like another 10 chapters. Well, actually, no, it's only a few chapters away. Only a couple chapters away, that said. We're going to see more than a couple. But we're going to see Abraham in the Abrahamic covenant, and circumcision will be the sign of that covenant. And that's not what makes the covenant happen. It's just a sign, right? Rainbows aren't keeping the floods away. They're just reminders of the covenant. And so we're going to see that covenant. We'll talk more about that covenant when we get there. But once again, the Abrahamic covenant, unilateral. Abraham did nothing to do. God chose him, God's going to bless him, and God's going to remain faithful in his promises. So, there's what we have with covenants, the flood, and the rainbow. On Monday, we'll probably finish up chapter 9. Then we'll get into the the Table of Nations in chapter 10. There's a lot in chapter 10. We might try and tackle it all at once. And then we get to the Tower of Babel in chapter 11. And then Abraham showing up in chapter 12. So we've got cool stuff ahead of us. And honestly, I always say that really up to chapter 11 is where Genesis has kind of got a lot of stuff, and it can be very slow. And we're going to pick up pace after this and start moving through getting half chapters and whole chapters done at a time. But that said, we're done for now. God bless you guys. Have an amazing day. And stay in God's word. Read it, believe it, and by faith, apply it to your lives. I'll see you guys around.